Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another stream. Let's just wait for the image quality to stabilize. So I'm just showcasing two miniatures that I painted over my previous stream. So those are two nasty guys that I painted, the Broken Spectres. I think that pretty much everything was painted over the stream. I didn't really do much offline, just applied matte varnish. So there's one guy. They are actually quite big. So that's the first guy with some overall dark color scheme with some flashy details to play with the notion that those are some kind of weird devices that hold them locked to this word, or the world of shadows. And yeah, and today I'm going to paint two more miniatures from the same keyword. I mean, one miniature and but twice, just to make things more fun. And I kind of, I think, figure out a neat way of making this ghostly zombie ghost like skin tone. And I will be doing the same on Mr. Mordrake, or Mr. Mordrakes, whom I will be painting today. So I happen to have two versions of them for some reason, and that's a very interesting character and miniature. It comes in the English Ivan box. So he's a totem, he's a beater, and he's, well, I'm not gonna say unkillable, but killing this model is really challenging because he gets resurrected when he dies at the cost of some irreducible damage to the master, who is a summoner and attacks from distance, so doesn't need to be in the thick of things. So pretty neat solution and clever design. And he's this remnant of Visit to Shadow Realm that accompanies English Ivan and doesn't seem to really like him. But I'm sure I will like painting it. So the plan is to start maybe with the base, then go with the skin and the ghostly skin, then with the elegant clothes. And yeah, and that's it. And he has some weird. I'm not sure what's the fluff about it, but there is like a glow symbol which is the same on English Ivan. So that's the cover of the box. They come in. So that's Mr. Mordrake. As you can see, he looks really mean and clearly unhappy to be here. I mean, in this world, in this universe. And he has on his right arm, he has this emblem which glows, and English Ivan has similar thing on his right arm as well. No, on his left arm, sorry. On his left arm. So I will try to figure out a way to make it glow. So that's why I will be using overall a dark color scheme for this guy. And that way the glowy symbols will be more noticeable. And obviously the eyes. The eyes need to be glowy as well. So let's start with. Actually, I will think that for the skin, the way I've been experimenting with it recently is I've been just using essentially two paints for it. So I'm gonna use the same method today, and I'll start with one of my favorite colors, which is the Glyph Charger Gray. Give it a bit of mix. And I will apply it directly onto the surface of all the elements which are, well, skin. And I just need to figure out a way in which you can see and I can see. That's the kind of compromise we need to get here. All right, seems to be showing well. All right, I've actually played against English Ivan only once in my Malifaux career. That was after the nerf, because when he was originally released, he was super, super strong. And he got nerfed slightly. And I think he's still quite competitive. Can be can be played on tournament level for sure. Maybe not the top player, maybe not the top master. I don't see him too often, but clearly one with very intriguing keyword, story, and generally a quite unique feel. Because when you think of the concept of summoners in games, you typically visualize someone who stays in the back, summons cannon fodder, and just enjoys and buffs the models that are summoned, which is the stereotypical approach. But this one kind of breaks the stereotype because he's an offensive summoner. He summons while dealing damage and attacking opponents. And what works quite well is that he treats distracted as focus, and his crew is all about handing distracted to everyone around him. Everyone around gets distracted, and that forces kind of different approach to gaming, because typically when you have an opponent who can shoot at you from distance, you stay in concealment. Not here, because he treats all the minuses as pluses. So you don't want to stay in concealing terrain when you play against English Ivan. And Mr. Mordrake, he's the kind of, I guess, something between beater and schemer. Not the hardest of beaters, let's say, comparing to chompy level of beater, but still can get things done and can be just a resource that you bring back. At least that's my understanding of how he would play on the table, having seen him in action only once. Hey, hey, hello, hello. Whoops. Welcome to the stream. Today it's all about this mean guy and his twin brother. Because I've decided to paint two of them and see if I'm able to get them both to the high level that I would presumably get while working on a single miniature. And just starting with the basic style. I mean, I've just said that I only faced him once, so can't really say much. But his crew tends to stay in a bubble at the beginning of turn one, spread distracted for everyone, and they treat distracted. So they treat all the minuses as if they are pluses, so they can start with distracted too, and then English Ivan has some neat movement tricks because they have those shadow markers. They place them. He uses them essentially as teleports, and he moves way up the board, summons someone in base contact with the opponent. Oh, and the funny thing is that he summons actually the higher the willpower of the target that he attacks, the better the summon he can get. So his basic summons are Deva, so the big thin guys, and Nocturnes, so the Scheme Runners. But he can summon Broken Spectres, but he needs willpower of at least 6, I believe. So if your opponent has willpower 6 models, then likely they will be quickly targeted by English Ivan. And he does it from distance, so he can still move around, he can get back, he can continue punishing. Lots of options. And he likes the keyword. He has this amazing scheme runner, Eva Havenhand, who can just teleport all over the board wherever she wants. She will get there as long as there is terrain next to it. So good at scheming, good at summoning, pretty good at dealing damage. Don't think they have any neat tricks of bypassing armor, but then explorers are... sure thing. Explorers are not really well known for being good against armor. And he's not an exception. And speaking of minions, so those are the big guys that he can summon. The Broken Spectres, kind of steampunk ghosts. I painted them last week on the stream. Lovely miniatures. I mean, so mean that they are actually nice. And I also started with those Nocturnes. I may get to them later in the stream. So just the base coat essentially on them and base colors. So those are the scheme runners. There's the third one. They look like a mixture of different types of animals or insects. But yeah, today it's all about the totem guy. Now, when it comes to skin, I mentioned that I will be using a simple but very effective method. And the method is that right now I've just applied base coat of Glyph Charger Gray. Now in order to deepen the shadows, I will use this very same color and just apply it again, but this time avoiding the raised area. So I'm not going to, just looking at his left tentacle, I'm just trying to let it go into the recessed areas, avoiding the raised areas. And that creates some nice smooth transition from shaded areas to slightly brighter ones. And the brighter ones will be worked on in a second. And again, not in a hurry. It's quite important to allow the paint to dry completely before apply the second darker version. And maybe some more on the face. I'm going to put some more darker shades towards the back and less towards the front, maybe a bit more around the eye sockets. His mustache will just remain pale. The tang is partly visible, or essentially the tang, looking at the artwork, looks like a black hole rather than a proper tongue that a human would have. He's clearly a humanoid creature, but not human. Again, applying it to the recessed areas. Looking back at the one that I just set aside, I'm going to make sure that there's actually more of the darker color inside, and that the raised areas just have the base coat. And that is a neat streak of making this very smooth transition from darker to brighter shades. And actually, well, if you've watched any of my previous streams, then you know that I mostly paint creatures, not humanoids, because this is my main area of interest. I just enjoy painting unnatural shapes, colors, creatures that are quite common in Malifaux. So this is a mixture of something in between those because it's humanoid, but clearly not human. With some of the elements like tentacles or other elements that are quite different. Now, in order to keep those things, those skin parts brighter, I'll be using a very, very simple trick. I'll just use Griff Charger Gray, so the same color I've been using, and I will mix maybe rosy flesh. I'll mix a very bright skin tone with it, and that will get me started. So I'm doing it on my palette, I keep it on the side. It's essentially an old CD that I just sprayed over with white spray. And what I'm doing is I'm just mixing so that I have this light grayish color, which is a little bit like, which has a rosy hint to it. Very, very slight hint of rosy color. And now I'll be painting the highlights. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna start with the face and paint some on the nose. I can be a bit more generous with with highlights here because the paint is very, very thin down, very much thin down. So that gives me some freedom to move around, and it's actually really hard to make a mistake if you have the paint watered down to such thin down to such consistency that it just flows smoothly. And this creates really nice and smooth highlights. I just try to focus on those raised areas. So in order to make sure I touch on all of those, I just turn the miniature around a few times. And make sure that I leave some of the darker shades in the recessed areas. And just moving smoothly. This paint flows so well when it's diluted. Then I can just move quickly from one section to another. And the same thing on the other guy. I mean, on the other, it's the same guy. But it's going to be actually quite interesting to see how similar they are after all at the end of the streaming session. If I see that the paint is beginning to turn more solid, I just add a tiny bit of water to it so that the idea is that the consistency, the thinned down the fact that the paint is thinned down and has different consistency than straight out of the pot just allows for easier and better control over the highlighting process. Because if I just apply it, I do not really need to put that much effort into creating smooth transitions because they kind of happen by themselves. I just apply slightly brighter shade to most of the raised areas. The same on his feet, which are again tentacle, smoky things that are not feet. I will add a bit more. So I have the same mixture on my palette. So what I'm going to do now, I just added a drop of water, and I have this dirty pinkish shade, and I will use it for highlights, for continued highlights. So I'm just applying it now onto the raised areas, which makes him look a bit like, which gives him this unhealthy, sickly appearance. So something that's not fully human, but enough to give a hint that it's a human-like creature. The same on the tentacles. Yeah, have a good evening too. Thanks for dropping by. So this will look like some kind of very, very unhealthy skin. That's my plan. With strongly defined recessed areas. And I'm just turning it to look at it from different angles to make sure all the parts which have the skin-like elements that they receive some proper highlights. Not too strong, and again trying to leave some of the previous layer showing so that there is smooth transition. Just like that, first 24 minutes of the stream have just passed, and there's already some significant progress on this ungentlemanly gentleman. The same on the other guy. And again, I'm just mixing in a drop of water. And highlights on the most raised areas like cheekbones, nose, just so that his face resembles human face actually. Well, doesn't remind of much. Well, it resembles English Ivan, but twisted and scary version of English Ivan. And there is a nice interaction between Ivan and the totem in the story. So Mr. Mordrake, because he has kind of unnerving presence. He follows English Ivan, who is this legendary spy. He follows English Ivan around, can take his form, can access places that he cannot access. So it may seem like they work in tandem, but the thing that makes it interesting is that Mr. Mordrake hates English Ivan. And it's hard to say that he hates him with all his heart, because we don't even know if he has a heart, being a creature of shadow or creature from the realm of shadow. And now for successive highlights, I'm just using the same mixture, and again, not trying to focus on the whole section of a tentacle just on the raised area. And by applying thin coats over and over again on the same surface, I mean, it's a bit time consuming. It requires some solid brush control, but the effect is that you get something that looks like super smooth and nice transition from one color to another. And mind you, I started with dark gray and we are approaching rosy skin tone, just to give this hint that it's a kind of human but not very human creature. And it just makes sense that if you have two of those, and I've chosen two miniatures on purpose, just to, again, highlight some of the techniques that I use for batch painting. So the the fact that I use this technique with diluted paint and highlights generated in this manner, it it makes it quite important to allow the paint to dry before I apply the next layer, which is just fine, which is perfect when I work on two miniatures which are similar or identical, because that way I can just smoothly move from one to another. And I'll keep on highlighting it. So right now you see the hint of rosy shade on those tentacles. And I'll add a bit more of that. Again, just rosy flesh, carne rosa, and thinning it down. If you don't feel comfortable using water, you can use special medium. Let's give it a good shake. So you can use Express Color Medium or Lamian Medium if you use GW products. That's the same thing. What it does, it thins down the paint, but doesn't break the consistency. So it still has solid coverage. That's why I generally prefer water, because water breaks down the consistency of paint, the opacity, and allows for easier highlights if I use this technique of adding numerous touches. And you see I'm just now gradually moving on, navigating smaller areas with my brush. So it looks like some kind of skin-like color emerging from dark gray. Well, essentially looks nasty. But it is a nasty creature that we're dealing with here. And of course, in terms of smoothness, it won't, I don't think it will ever be better than using an airbrush. However, with an airbrush, you need a proper setup, you need space, you need the right consistency, the right tools, and a lot of practice and a lot of patience. And I don't have any of those. I mean, I have a lot of patience, but I'm just not a fan of using airbrush. Just feel like I can have a better control of the process if I use brush only. And again, just putting some highlights on the raised areas. So some final touches on the skin, and then I will move to the glowy red eyes. Or maybe the mouth first. Or the black hole that used to be mouth before he became a weird creature of shadow. So let's do the mouth, and for that I will just go with green-black. So very, very dark contrast, if you will, paint. Essentially, it's the same notion as contrast paint. It's paint that's designed by Army Painter. I think that there is now a new edition that has hit the stores over the past couple of weeks, I believe. So it's not going to be like proper mouth, just essentially a black hole. And as for the mustache, well, why not give it a white, delicate white highlight? Seems the paint has clogged a little bit. If it happens, all you need is paper clip. Typically have a box of them because I use them for assembling the miniatures and clipping elements which require additional support, or when I glue miniatures to resin bases, I just use pins. So what you do is you essentially just use the paper clip, and that gets the job done. Right, there we go. Now I'll just paint the mustache. In white. I'll just add another layer of black in a second. And time for the eyes now. Because we have the base skin tone. I mean, we have the skin pretty much done. Maybe I can just very lightly mix in a little bit of white to the rosy skin tone and make it super bright, and just using the tip of brush add like a tiny dot on the nose, on the cheek, on the other cheek, like this final highlight to really help define the face. If you watch other weird painters, and Elinor really does the excellent job of doing like simple dots for final highlights, and they go such a long way towards improving the overall appearance of the miniature, because you see those sharp points immediately, and it's a kind of neat streak that makes it look like there is even more depth than there actually is. And if done properly and consistently over the whole miniature, it can look really amazing. Like you can probably look up in the archives Elinor's stream of, I think, 2 separate streams of painting Nekima, the Broodmother, the new versions, or not so new anymore, but the second version of Nekima, and you'll get the idea. And I think it worked quite well here. So what I will do now, I'll just use this bright skin tone to kind of redefine the mouth. So that's how it looks right now. Just pausing for a second to show you guys the progress. And as you can see, there is this quite nice transition from dark to bright, and looks kind of disgusting, but that's the idea, that it's not to look, it doesn't need to look pretty, right? It's an evil creature, so looking pretty is not a thing. Right, time for the eyes. For the eyes, nothing out of the ordinary. It's the same thing I've been using consistently for all my Neverborn and most of the creatures or humanoids that I paint. The same thing I did last week. So what I'm going to do now is I'll start with, maybe I'll switch a brush, and I'll start with pure red. And this actually can be applied in excess. It's not about locking in the paint on the pupil. It's more about just generally giving it a solid red base coat. I think I'll add a hint of purple to the tank. Just a hint of purple. Because otherwise it can look less interesting. I want a more complex look. And this is actually, I'm not sure if this may be just my favorite miniature from the box set. I think I will paint the clothes in a very similar fashion to English Ivan, but with the only difference that his will have this grayish ghostly hint to them, whereas English Ivan will have a more solid look. Now, once the red is dry, and it dries super fast because it's just a tiny amount of paint, I will highlight it with yellow. See, that's not really necessary to give it such a good shake, but I encourage you to do that because it just, if you do it consistently, your paints will be usable for much longer time. Just a good practice and a good habit to develop. I think this one has a good tip, so I'm just moving to the brush with a slightly thinner tip, but not the tiniest one. It still needs to hold some paint. Because the thing is that paint dries super fast on small surfaces. It's The mixture is based with some kind of mixing medium, which is basically water with some drops of chemicals. And water evaporates quickly and it's warm. So the warmer, the faster, and the smaller the surface, the faster it dries. But this maybe requires some good practice to get the pupils locked in fast and confidently. And now I'll just move to white, which I still have on my palette. It has started to dry, so I'm just refreshing it with a touch of water. And I want a really solid small tip. I'm trying to keep some of the white visible, some of the yellow visible. So trying to place the white highlight more or less in the center of each pupil. And the same on this one. And here. And now I will mix first. This is the blood letter, so glaze. A solidly thin down paint could also do the trick. What I'll do now is I'll just again apply it in excess and literally flood the whole eye socket with red. Allow it to dry, but not completely, because as it dries, it tints the whole area. And I'm just removing now the excess of paint from the brush on the tissue and now retouching it, kind of absorbing the excess of red. And as a result, we have this glow-like effect around the eyes, which is an easy and fairly fast way of getting this glow-like effects. Now I mentioned that I want a tag which is somewhat purplish. So I've just given a shake to Alien Purple. Alien Purple. I don't think I've used this paint. Might be the first time I use it. It's not like violet, but it has a strong hint of purple. I'm just mixing it a little bit with black ink that I still have on the palette. That's the advantage of using palette, not necessarily a wet palette, but generally a palette where you can kind of backtrack to what you've used and use it to your advantage. And I'm just placing small highlight on the tongue. Now the base color, because that was purple mixed with black, so now the pure purple highlight on the tongue. And now a touch of white. And we have a tongue that's not just a black hole, but it looks a bit like a tongue. So here we are with skin and face done in around 45 minutes, which is a solid start, I believe. So time for his clothes now. And we'll start with the easy ones. And the easy ones should be the white elements. I think that's what I'm gonna start with. So I'll just bring back the white. And for that purpose, I'm using off-white so that it's not immediately impactful. Don't want to jump right into pure white when I work on white highlights, just to give me a chance to modify it as I go. Of course, he has a tie, so the tie will need to be different. I think the tie might be just purple. Let me just see how purple can look. Yeah, it looks okay. And I'll move to the clothes now. Or maybe the base. Ah, there are options, plenty of options. Okay, I think I can start with the hat. So my intention is to paint it with dark grayish brown, but before it gets to this dark grayish color, I'll start with something that's pretty bright, so hardened leather. That's going to be the start, just essentially the base color for his clothes. Because it's a contrast paint, it's a speed paint, it's pretty bright, and I will grab a larger brush for ease of application on larger surfaces, and I'll just put it directly on the miniature, which will create this very, very bright brown. Looks glossy, doesn't really matter at this point because it's going to dry and become more matte. But it's a good starting color because I can then decide if I want to keep it darker, where I want to keep it darker, how I want to keep it darker. And essentially for highlights, I can just navigate around the color that I have now as a base. I can actually compare it to Gore Granta Fur, which is slightly darker. I think it's Gore Granta Fur is even better because it's feels more solid. Yeah, I'll stick with Gore Granta Fur. So I'm just applying it generously over the whole surface, avoiding pools. I don't want the paint to stay in one place for too long because it dries and then it's hard to really do anything with it. If I move it around fast enough, I just have the base color. So it looks like I'm moving towards the finish already, but trust me, I'm actually quite far away from finishing this miniature, because then it's all the matter of really how I take it further from where I am currently, how I add the shadows, how I kind of keep it consistent to look like a creature of shadow rather than just a human being. Looks super, super glossy, but once it starts drying, it gets this super nice matte finish. And Gorgranta fur, it's excellent for brown clothes. Brown fur, of course, but works really well. I typically use it for all the belts and all the leather elements, but I just couldn't resist using it here on the whole surface because I just seems like the right color to work with. So it looks like there's a good chance I might actually do something more than Mordrake. But I have miniatures prepared. I can actually switch to them later on, but for now it's just all about Mr. Mordrake. And while this one continues to dry, I will already move to the second one. Just looking around if I missed any spots. If there are any spots where there is too much paint, then I can try to move it. I left the color because, as I said, I'm just now focusing on those larger surfaces, larger areas like legs and, well, the whole trousers, right? And top, so the jacket. He's a kind of copy of English Ivan. So while English Ivan will have similar colors, obviously this human skin tone, not the gray skin tone that this one has. I will also use more solid browns on Ivan, whereas the browns here will be darker, maybe moving towards the gray range of things. Well, it is a cool miniature. Now that I have seen more of it painted, clearly grows on me. Quick mix to the paint. Well, this is one of my oldest contrast paints, which are still usable. So it's by default thicker than it should be. Just navigating around the whole surface, making sure that I leave no white spots. Yeah, there was one white spot. They just look bad. And again, the main advantage of using contrast paints is that they give you solid coverage, some nice pre-shading, and if you just want the miniature painted and out of the way, that's probably the easiest and safest way to do that. But it also opens up many possibilities of just continuing to work on it and add more fine details. Okay, now the color. Just here being careful not to put any brown on the face. That would be a shame because I've already spent like 45 minutes painting the face and wouldn't want to ruin all the work that I've put into making it look good. So far so good. All right. Now the hat. It's nice that they actually created this scary shadow creature that just happens to wear elegant clothes. But then you have zombies who just happen to enjoy ice cream in the world of Malifaux, so don't think anything. Don't really think that any of the ideas can feel out of place here. Which opens up, so many possibilities for the creative team in terms of designing models and rules and characters in the fluff. And speaking of game and fluff, well, summer is right around the corner, so we all know what it means. We know it means that another Gen Con, which I believe it takes place late July or sometime in August. I think August, early August, or first half of August typically. And historically, it's been a time that Word would release a new book, and can't help but start to feel curious about what this could potentially mean. New masters, new titles, new keywords. Well, definitely some new starter box, right? Because some factions like Rezzers, and we've just seen this fungal keyword, and two Happy Dancers, which seems like a logical choice for a starter box miniature. But then we already have so many miniatures, such a large pool of models to choose from that somehow I don't expect new masters to be part of the new book. But I may be wrong. I'm just guessing. Your guess is as good as mine. Take another pause here, and let's just have a look at what's been painted here. So we have two Mr. Mordrakes, looking very dandy and glossy at this point. Yeah, here they are. Maybe I'll just put one to make it easier to catch focus. So that's 1 hour of painting, and this miniature could be already hitting the table. Because why not? It has a minimum of 3 colors. Well, the base is not painted, that's a thing, but other than that, pretty much ready for gaming. But of course, we're not stopping here. I'm already preparing soft tone, which is a wash, so not as strong as heavy on the miniature as contrast paint. And I'll just use it on the shirt, or at least the part of the shirt that's visible. Looks super bright, but that's because the light is reflecting off of it. It's not that bright in real life. Maybe you can pause here just to see it more clearly. I think it's possible to see the progress that's been done so far here. Just sit more comfortably, and as we continue to paint, I will just need to think now of a way to make this brown look more interesting, because right now it's just a solid base coat of brown, and of course we want more. We want it to look more interesting. But I like the facial details, how they came out. It looks kind of like in the art box, but still different, and not human-like, which is another thing that I wanted to ensure it doesn't look like. So now let's maybe add some browns to it. Some touches of brown, and we'll start with. Actually, I will do Gorgon brown in the recessed areas. Again, give it a good shake. Thin it down. Just with water for now. And I'll just put it on the clothes. Just to take away the shine, and already start mapping the highlights. Well, in a way, what I'm doing now is I'm glazing over the whole surface with an acrylic paint versus glazing with express color, contrast paint, or you name it. Just to kind of add a bit of warmth to the color. My cat is snoring behind me. Need a bit more of that. I mean, not more of cat snoring, but more of this brown. And as I said, the color that I've put there with contrast paint serves as a, well, generally speaking, point of reference. Because now that I'm glazing thin down acrylic paint on that, it takes away all the gloss, all the shininess of it. And that will make it for an easier canvas, let's say, to continue the work on. Now that's more in line with what I have in mind for this to look like. And again, I'm just using water. No other specialist medium, just water. I want the paint to be super thin. And it's a very nice, I haven't really stressed the fact that it's such a dynamic sculpt, which you see sometimes that miniatures are really nicely designed, but fairly static in their poses, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But the rest of the crew think, okay, so Ivan has a pose with which he's just like acknowledging someone and tipping the hat, and the rest, Ava is like stretching her whip and preparing for some action. Gibson is just meddling with his equipment, and that's it. They don't look like they are doing anything much, and he's like already running. So now this stage is all about precision, taking your time to ensure you cover the whole surface, but you may be able to see it that the gloss from the initial highlight is already gone. And I think I will redo the mouth so that it's actually darker, because the purple tang is kind of takes away this ghostly feel that I'm after. So the easiest way to approach this is to just think about it. Okay, left arm, left arm, left arm. Just focusing on one section of the model. And naturally, the areas which are darker will remain dark. Now the right arm, right arm, right arm. Just locking myself into full focus, making sure that I concentrate on this section of the model, as I've just covered everything on the left arm. Time for the right arm. Now the right side and the back. So again, thinning paint down slightly, painting the back. Hard to believe that it's actually almost middle of the year already. Summer's right around the corner. We've been experiencing some lovely and sunny weather, and well, that not only means that Gen Con is coming up right up, but time flies by too fast. Come on, it's holiday season almost upon us. And this year it's going to hit different because my older daughter has started her primary school, and that means that we'll have one kid at home because normally she would be at kindergarten for the whole summer period, and we would take 2 or 3 weeks of holidays to spend them together as a family, but now it's going to be a bit different. Okay, now I'll switch to slightly different shade of brown. Which will be charred brown, so very, very dark shade of brown. But actually, before I do it, I'll do what I had planned to do, but almost forgot, which is the mouth has to be darker. I mean, it doesn't have to. Nothing has to happen. It's just my fancy, but I think it will, in terms of overall composition, will look better if it's all black and wide open, like more ghostly. Again, looking glossy now, but that will change when it dries. Actually, it looks like there is even some teeth visible. So let me try to get them somehow marked out. Let's see if I can do that. I think that's worth trying. At least give an indication that teeth are there. Yeah, that worked on this one. And I see no reason why it wouldn't work on the other one. Yeah. Now, darkening it. So charred brown, which is very, very dark shade of brown. Again, mixing it with water to thin it down. And what I'll do first, as I will apply more of it, just a little bit of it, but I need more of it. And I will test it on the lower section, which is going to be darker anyway. So perfectly fine to start darker shades there. The same on the other one. Now I'm just going to let it flow into the recessed areas, starting with the back on both of them. I actually really like working with browns. Super nice colors. And maybe some towards the back just to make sure that the shades are where they are meant to be. So from other news, the Volleyball World Championship has concluded. I mean, it took place in the UK this weekend, and the British team won, I believe. So a really nice showing, and I think that the Polish team came in second. It was a team tournament, and there were 3 teams from Poland, and the guys were extremely happy with the experience with the overall experience. And I've been thinking about going to the UK for a tournament, and now I think I will definitely go next year. I just want to experience it as well because it sounds like a lot of fun, and I see no reason to postpone it further. Now I will be placing some more highlights on the brown part. And for that, I will go to brighter shade of brown, which is grunge brown from Vallejo Color. What I find works so well with Vallejo paints is that they just complement one another so well, and they level themselves really well on the miniature. What I mean is that the paints just, you do not need to mix colors to have those gradients, transitions. You just apply them directly over the surface that you've painted, just using brighter shades. And that does the trick, really. Simple. And right now I've just used 3 shades of brown, and I'm using the brightest shade. I'll just try to position myself better so that you see the progress clearly. So just using the quick brush strokes along the lines of the texture. And don't worry, I will add the unearthly feel to him soon enough. We're just approaching the middle of the stream, so I don't feel like I need to be in a hurry. For now, it's all about this more meticulous aspect of the painting process. But these paints just interact so well with one another that they just create those smooth highlights, well, seemingly without an effort. I'll just need to make sure I take good pictures when he's finished, because it's hard to really appreciate the level of detail and the smoothness of paint job when it's done on live stream, because before paint's dry, it's fairly glossy, and that means that my desk lamp, which reflects off of it, it's a LED light as well, so it kind of obscures the view. I mean, the actual painting process is not that easy to follow. I mean, that's why I comment on all the small steps that I take. So slightly thin down paint onto the raised areas now, and trying to kind of smooth the transition, make it smoother into the recessed areas. So no fancy tricks right now, although there will be some tricks with this emblem on the right arm. But yeah, I've already moved from this dark brown towards brighter. And as we're slowly heading into the second half of the stream, I think it's pretty decent progress at this point. Oh, the cat has waken up because it's looking at what? Is it a spider or a mosquito? Let me just see. I think it's a mosquito. Yeah, go eat him. Go eat him. Hunter's instincts that I never knew were there seem to be waking up in my cat. Never too late, even for around 12-year-old cat. 12 years old. That's at least that's how long he's been at my household. He's a good companion and enjoys. It's funny that when my wife and kids together with me we stay in the living room and he wakes up in bedroom, he just immediately joins us because he wants company. Ooh, hello. Hey, Kater Lama. Nice seeing you. Oh, well, I'm painting too? Well, why not? Why not? That's the easiest answer I can get. I just thought that I would take advantage of the fact that I currently have two, and I will try to paint them both simultaneously to showcase some of the speed painting techniques and just see if I can maintain reasonably high quality while working on two similar miniatures. Oh, my cat is so intrigued by a mosquito. That's good. I like it. Keep on hunting, buddy. So two Mr. Mordrakes for two different people, and definitely an interesting miniature. And I spent like the first hour painting those tentacles and face to make it look partly human, partly inhuman. Just give it enough of hint of, well, former humanity at least. And now I'm placing some highlights on the brown elements. All is done using Vallejo paints, which are, well, to my mind, they are the best paints that are available right now, given the price and quality. Eat that mosquito. Show no mercy. Just speaking to my cat. And the main advantage is that they just level themselves so well on the surface, and I can just use them. And the paint, there is seemingly quite some contrast when I place it on the surface of the miniature, but the way it levels itself, meaning that when it dries, it just becomes like a natural, smooth transition. Yeah. Take over. No, that's not gonna happen. Hopefully, not at this state of game. I mean, explorers are. They were quite strong when they were released. Then they got nerfed back, especially Nexus and Ivan too. But that's what happens when new releases are out and people figure out new combos that the playtesters haven't been able to come up with. That can happen. It's just part of the design process. But the good thing is that Word really factors in that feedback, and every now and then they receive erratas that bring some of the models that are just too good, and they bring them back in line. And I think I'm one of the many people that really hope to get to see an errata soon. Now a slightly brighter shade of brown, which will be Parasite Brown, but I mean, it's already looking pretty good. So we have this bluish gray shade to his tentacles and some warm browns. Can't seem to get the quality as high as I would like it to be. Okay, the cat has eaten a mosquito and wants out. Fine by me. Now I'll use this brighter shade of brown, give it a shake. But this time I will use a slightly larger brush. Maybe not this one. Give it a bit of overbrush. And really start making those raised areas pop. And I will use the same brush for a brighter overbrush in a second. The same on the other one. So again, just starting to really bring out those raised areas. And then I will make sure to redefine those recessed areas. So the, for example, place where his pants end and coat begins, because they kind of blend in together now. And that will further enhance the three-dimensional aspect of this model. But first, highlights and then shades. At least that's my approach today. I'm not saying it's the right approach, it's just what I'm doing today. So now I'm using the same brush with thick bristle, and I'm just going to do another overbrush over the raised areas, but this time trying to be a bit more selective and a bit more delicate. So the hat, the rim of the hat from the front, to make sure it's much brighter, and the front of the collar. The back, and some highlights. I mean, this kind of looks, adds the appearance of adds a well, certain appearance that makes it look as if there is a kind of texture to it. That's why it's not really pure dry brush, because the brush is pretty much loaded with paint at this point. I'm just like scratching them rather than brushing. I'm like scratching the miniature with it to make sure that it catches on the most, just the raised areas, only them, because it gives this appearance of some kind of texture to it. See, so that's already some more texture visible on this guy. And now I'm trying to get it more in line with my camera. And the colors, when I look at my previous screen on the page that's used for transmitting the video, just looks much darker for some reason than what I see in the Twitch stream. I don't know if this is something that could be adjusted, or this is just the way it's meant to be, but well, I will definitely take some good pictures when this miniature is fully painted and based and all that jazz. For now, we are in the we are in the second half of the stream now, so 90 minutes have gone really fast, which I guess shows that time flies by when you're having fun. I'm just so locked into the focus mode of just painting and chatting about it, and I just never notice how fast the time flies. But it's good. The timing is good. I'm not in a hurry. And I can give a bit of a dry brush on the front of the clothes, maybe a little bit, just to further enhance this notion that there is some texture to it. Now, time for some tweaks to it. I will take maybe mid-brown. This is a glaze. I mean, it's a wash, but I will make it a glaze. It is slightly reddish, and I will further boost the reddish aspect of it with some brown, which I will do in a second. Just trying to maintain some kind of order. I will add a touch of red wash, just give it a shake. Maybe a bit more of a shake. Let's see if that's done the trick. Yep, it's red now. And I will just add water to it. Plenty of water. So it's like 50% paint, 50% water. This is the kind, yeah, it's maybe a little bit of more brown. And then I will just glaze it. It's like filtering for the whole miniature. So what I'm doing now is I'm just applying it over the whole miniatures, because some of the highlights that I've placed might become a bit too harsh, and that kind of brings them back in line. So that's glaze number one. Then the second glaze will be yellow on the raised areas, just to make it more interesting, then a bit more purple in the recessed areas, and then I'll figure out a way to add this more like ghostly aspect. Or not necessarily. That there is a point to make this one look similar to Ivan, because he's like a clone wannabe of English Ivan. But this is the process that I really like because it's tinting the miniature. It's like filtering the miniature. Well, the easiest comparison I can think of is when you have simple graphic programs, not necessarily Photoshop, just simple programs, and you just click on different filters, right? And it doesn't have a dramatic effect, but it changes the overall perception of the miniature. So brings things together in a specific way. So that's what I'm doing with those glazes now. Well, that's the first glaze. Second one coming right up. Ideally, the miniature should be fully dry before the next glaze happens, unless I want some smooth transitions. And I may just do that with a purple glaze. Actually, not purple. I will use Carbourg Crimson. Sorry, Carbourg Crimson. I will mix it with what I have on the palette, and the slightly purplish glaze will go directly into the recessed areas while it dries, just to make sure it's not overloaded with it. Purple interacts pretty nicely with black, with brown, with black too, but we're working with brown surfaces here. And for my next highlight, glaze, I will simply do pure yellow. This one, Lamentus yellow. And I will just focus on the raised areas. Kind of try to make them look a bit, add some warmth to them. So the tip of the cape here. And maybe a little bit on top of his hat. And the front here as well. This kind of further enhances this saturated 3D look. The knees and the knees here as well. And actually, for the mouth, I will go full red. I will go with blood for the blood god because it's this heavily saturated red look that I think will go quite well with what I have in place already. Yeah. Now it's still a dark gaping hole, but it's got some color to it. Even better. And that's a mean shade. Okay, brown is settling in nicely. And while it's happening, I will already go with much darker color, which is at this point, maybe even I'll go as far as go to contrast brown. It's contrast psycho brown, so super dark shade of brown. Rather thin brush, a very thin brush with a thin tip. And what I'll do now is I'll paint some separating lines here and there, starting over here. Just to make sure that certain areas are kind of isolated. like the here when the clothes, when the different pieces of cloth meet. This one, well, this requires some good brush control, but if you do it properly, it will just add a lot towards maintaining this more three-dimensional aspect. That's what I mean, and I think that the inside of the color can be also darkened a little bit. It's all about, I think, at this point, really adding touches that emphasize the elements you want to overexpose. And in case of what I'm doing now, it's the face that I want to overexpose. Just frame it in darker shades, and it immediately will become more clearly noticeable. And I can also use it towards the bottom, just to keep things darker here as well. And as we are approaching the third hour of the stream, things are looking good. Clearly there is progress. Now this emblem on the shoulder, I will leave it for the final section. But we're not getting to the final section as of yet. Still plenty to do. Well, not plenty, but some to do. I think the tie needs a bit more blue. So I'll add a touch of blue with Storm Blue, which is a heavy blue. It's a kind of grayish blue. So maybe not the best choice. Maybe I can go with... Oh, no, that should be fine. Just need to give it a good shake, because otherwise this blue becomes gray. And I will apply it with the tip of the brush, just to the tip of the tie that can be seen in here. So just using the tip of the brush, and again emphasizing one element, because that way the white around it also becomes more clearly noticeable. I think the mustache is kind of blending in with the face, and I'm not sure if I like it or if I want them darker. But since it's more like a ghostly figure, I'll just leave it as it is. And also for one more thing that I need to do with this darker shade of brown, and again I'm switching to my brush with fine tip. Here are those areas. Don't even know the proper word to describe it, this part of clothing. But again, this will allow me to separate sections of clothes better. Feels like the colors should be different. I mean, one good way of rethinking the way you paint clothes is just looking at pictures of clothes, and it kind of blew my mind where I really started observing clothes with the intention of analyzing how light and shadow impacts the perception of colors. Just throw a t-shirt in a sunny spot in your house and watch how the light manipulates the colors. It's pretty incredible. So that allows the tentacle hands or salad fingers, if you will, to be more clearly and more clearly visible and in a way better defined. And the same on the other arm. See, that's another reason why it can make sense if you have two identical miniatures. Let's say you're painting one for yourself and another for someone else, or two for other people, or whatever the case may be. It just makes a lot of sense to paint two miniatures simultaneously because you can just quickly adjust and look at them simultaneously and make adjustments on the fly. So here, for example, there are buttons. I want the shades here inside of them a bit more heavily pronounced. So I'm just letting in some dark brown. Oh, looking pretty good. Now let's do a bit more. Maybe the bases now. For this one, I've just ordered a base because you will have like a factory red brick base. And this one has a classic city base. So I think I'll paint this base now. But I still feel like there is room for making him look more like a ghost. I'll play with this color. May regret it, but why not? Let's just grab a medium-sized brush and see what we can do with some touches of athematic blue, which is a lovely shade because it's pretty subtle. It won't make a dramatic impact from the get-go. But we can actually try putting it slightly on some sections of the model just to kind of boost this notion that it's a ghost, it's not a human being. And putting it in, well, seemingly random places, but I want to look like he's in a way emerging from a shadow. So part of him is enveloped in shadows still while he's making his full presence to the world known. And that is the element that English Ivan won't have. So he will get some weird athematic blue light, and Ivan will have the same type of brown colors on him, but not the same effects, and definitely more towards his mutated limbs, or mutated or formed by shadow. And now it's becoming to look more interesting. Now it's more like it. Automatic blue is such a game changer. You can just use it and it immediately starts adding something special to the model. And you may think I'm ruining all the hard work I've put into painting to this point, but not really. I I will in a way replicate the painting process on the clothes for Ivan. Maybe a bit more towards the face, but for now let's focus on those sleeves that are partly rolled up, and they will be affected by this unnatural glow-like thing. See, now it's getting really more interesting. This is fun. Yep, this is definitely fun. This is where it starts coming together nicely. And the buildup of brown has actually made a lot of sense because now it's brown doesn't just absorb this blue, it kind of takes it in and allows it to work with it. And I will paint more of it from the below so that like the shadow is really stronger from beneath, just making sure the paint doesn't pool there. Well, it's already becoming to look pretty cool. The same on the other guy. I mean, on the same guy, but on the other miniature. So that's my favorite part about those streams, apart from interaction with comments and people who just chime in with their thoughts, is that I don't really know what I will end up doing until I start doing it. And it starts making sense. And then I'm more happy about what I'm doing. I think some blue makes sense to be added also here. Yeah, final hour of the stream happening very soon. So it's going to look pretty nice when I paint Ivan in a way that is similar but with human flesh and more saturated brown without those additions of automatic blue, and that will tie them together nicely as representatives of the same keyword who are connected but who are, despite many similarities in appearance at first glance, are quite different. And definitely that's the ghost-like feel that I wanted to have. And I hate the way that light distorts the appearance. I will try to shade it from the light a little bit. But you see that you should be able to see the way that this athematic blue has reacted with brown and kind of toned it down in selective areas. All right, let's move on. That looks really like an interesting shade of brown. I like it. Really, really like it. Guess I can go to the bases now. And for the bases, since I have more than 1 hour, slightly more than 1 hour, I will paint his base and maybe some other bases that I have, that I started last week on those nocturnes, because why not? Here there are the nocturnes. So I'll start with, I don't want to make it brown because he's already brown. Maybe I'll just go with, I think I'll go with yellow because that's what I had on these guys. And that's what seems to be making a lot of sense for this guy as well. Yeah, I will try to keep the colors. Doesn't seem intuitive, but it's what I will do. I'll start with Zealot Yellow. And apply it just directly on the whole base. It will make sense. Guess I will further tweak it with orange and brown, and I will do it while it continues to dry. And who knows, maybe I will even get the nocturnes painted that I started last week. It's a bit of unusual week. It's because unusual month because it's my third stream of the month already. So really happy to be doing so many streams in 1 month. Expect to be doing 2 streams next month, and already thinking at this point what to present you guys next time around. And currently I'm kind of leaning towards Devas because those are some of the coolest, literally the coolest looking miniatures, like elongated bodies, expressionless faces, top hats. They look creepy. And I have 6 of them. Would it make sense to paint 6 miniatures in one stream? I mean, it would definitely be possible. The question is, would it make actual sense? Well, we'll see. Okay, maybe this lighting setup is better. I think this light now should be a bit better. Still looks kind of pale. Maybe it's my second screen because I've recently switched to a new screen. So now I have this curved screen which is set, which I can switch on it between work and fun after work, because I have my laptop and my PS5 connected to it, and my PS5 is eagerly waiting for the release of new Diablo game. Been a big fan of that game, and really hope that the new one delivers. Now, this one has some skulls on the base, so I'll paint them first before I apply yellow. So there is a skull here. So suddenly a stream about Mr. Mordrake has turned to a stream about nocturnes, which still makes sense, because those are, after all, creatures from the same realm, if you can say so. And yellow. I think yellow makes a lot of sense because it makes it look kind of vivid and bright compared to the dark colors on the miniatures themselves. And the skulls, I will need to repick them with white later on anyway, because otherwise they will just disappear among all the yellow shades that are there. But I think the camera setup is a bit better now, although it still looks much less saturated when I look at the screen on the Twitch, but might be. Actually, let me just drag it to my other screen and see how it compares. Yeah, I think that's the screen thing. Definitely. Yeah, they look pretty saturated. Yeah, they look as they are supposed to look. It's just my other screen with weird setup I have. So all good. All good then. Plenty of time left to finish what I started. I think I'll be able to do both. I mean, both Mordrakes and the Nocturnes that I started last week. Because the reason I'm applying yellow directly is that I will move to orange in a second and then to brown, and this will come together like it did on the Broken Spectres. All right, time for orange. And for that, I will use Fire Giant Orange. Using the same brush, I'm not even gonna bother cleaning it because I just want to immediately allow the colors to blend on the base. So what I'm doing now is I'm just using orange on the cobblestones. And then I will use some brown. And when it dries, I will just give it a general dry brush with off-white. I will actually switch to smaller brush now to have better control of the process. So moving swiftly, because when the paint dries, the colors will kind of blend together with one another nicely without much need of meticulous work and thinning down the paints from my end. And I'm just trying to ensure that I put those darker spots of orange into the more of the recessed areas rather than the raised ones. Of course, those skulls here on this base will be painted separately. And then, as final step, I will just use snakebite leather. And very lightly. Okay, before I move to snakebite leather, I still have one more to go. So those pipes and the raised areas on them and around them. And back to the one that I started with. So now adding the darkest shade with snakebite leather. While still leaving traces of orange visible. So moving quite fast today, on this part at least. Wasn't really moving fast on the Ivan part. Not the Ivan, the Mordrake part. I think it will be fun to see how they look next to one another once they've painted fully, and see how much sense it made to approach painting them this way. By this way, I mean similar with dominant brown, but different in the way that brown is tinted by athematic blue. And I will reinforce the athematic blue tint in a second. I'll just add a bit more brown to the recessed areas here. They will come together nicely when I dry brush it. But that needs, before I dry brush it with off-white, just needs to dry thoroughly. I mean, it really needs to be super perfect dry. Yeah, a bit more athematic blue now. To further stress the fact that this is not a human. And again, more around those mutated limbs. Just trying to apply it roughly around the same areas that I had tweaked previously. the same around the, well, legs, right? Which aren't really legs, but I mean, looks kind of grotesque and gruesome. Okay, there he is. Now, I think I might do a bit more tweaks on the tiny minions. No need to hurry, plenty of time. So this is where we are at. And it's a nice mix because now we have this smooth transition from gray towards pinkish color. And the glazes of athematic blue have worked quite well. And we have some contrast with the bright base. And I'm thinking of something similar on the base, like I have here, which means that the base needs to dry. And while it dries, I can paint these three critters. I mean, paint them real fast, but starting with an overbrush of white. And I will definitely get back to Mr. Mordrake's in a second. Just a few minutes on these guys. So a general overbrush just to bring out all those nice details that they have. Because those are really, really nicely designed miniatures. And when I start lightly dry brushing on a pre-shaded black, because it's black that was applied on white, black contrast paint applied on white, which means that it generated some highlights already there. The other one now, the insectoid-like, it's got lovely texture on its carapace. Absolutely lovely. And those flame-like bits, they will be treated with a similar effect to what I did with those bright spots on Broken Spectres. But for now, I just want to give it an overbrush to really bring out the details. And then I will further tweak it, I think, with maybe dark blue or light blue or green. A few options for sure. And the glowy red eyes, they need to come through on those as well. Now a bit more of dry brush work, I guess, on the bases. While I'm still dry brushing, makes sense to actually dry brush a little bit on the base as well to really make this texture of cobblestones pop. And I will work on those skulls in a second. They need to become brighter, much brighter. And the same here on the base. And one more base before I work on those skulls. And while I have the bone white color, I will thin it down slightly, just with water, no special medium. And paint those close. Maybe thin it a bit more. Or mandibles, however they're called. The spiky pinks he uses to, well, to battle and to hurt others. So now picking really those skulls, and I think there is like a rib cage partly hidden in the sand here. As there is a lot of yellow, the yellow will kind of absorb the white, so I may need to give it one more highlight at least to ensure it's fully visible. The same on its clothes. Maybe with pure white. Yeah, 40 minutes to go. Plenty of time. Still feeling comfortable. I mean, I don't have to finish the miniature, but I want to get to the point where I feel like, okay, this just needs a few tweaks here and there, and I can do them offline. Just want to do the majority of work during the stream. Seems to make more sense. Now, for those guys, what I will do now is I will give them a glaze of purple, I think. Yeah, I think purple makes sense. I will use the Carborg Crimson that I had used before because it's this nice dark shade of purple which has a kind of hint of, very light hint of brown to it, I guess. Seems to be working well. So it's a generous glaze. On the whole body. The eyes as well, because the eyes will be reddish and glowy anyway. And those flame-like bits, they will get some white on them and then fluorescent pigment, just like the Broken Spectres got on the things that are like batteries on their collars. Don't really know what the story is, but seems like it's a kind of device that keeps them connected to the will of English Ivan or to the realm of Earth in general. Now the other one, again, this is a kind of filter-like thing to do. I'll need to allow it to dry thoroughly before I continue. And that's another advantage of painting a few things simultaneously, because while one thing needs to dry, you can already switch to another and keep on working there. Because you know what happens, I mean, we're all guilty of that, aren't we? That when you start to wait, you just click on your mobile, check out Facebook, you get some notifications, you get some recommendations, your mind is taken off of the process in a heartbeat, and you can do doom scrolling or fun scrolling and spend the next hour not really achieving much. That's why when I paint, it's once I get into the groove and into the proper focus, and I have to admit that when I do streams, I get into it from the get-go. I just want to focus only on it. No distractions. No distractions that would somehow affect my work. And those closed on the front, why not give them a bit of shading and some light. And I will be able to paint the eyes in a second, I think. So I'll just wet blend them. And now I think, okay, while I wait, I can already paint the eyes, or maybe not the eyes, those bright elements with a bit more white, which will absorb the dry pigment, the fluorescent dry pigment quite well. So I'm a bit jumping in between 5 separate miniatures today, but all from the same keyword and all featuring some similar techniques. Just some. And the white is added. Looks like a mess now, right? Doesn't look great. But the thing about white is that it will just absorb the fluorescent pigment so much better than purple, making it look more vivid. What I mean is, like, the elements that are so bright and vivid here were painted with white first, and that's something more or less what I'm looking for on these guys. Okay, so it continues to dry, and I guess I can do the emblem now. So I'll switch to the brush with fine tip, and I need to figure out a way. Okay, it's a pretty simple symbol. Just want to make sure I fill it in with white properly. Fortunately for me, it's not as complex as it is on the artwork, because if it was, then it would be a major challenge to get it right. Just want to make sure I get solid coverage of white on this symbol before I move to the other Mordrake. This is fun, actually. Just flowing, seamlessly switching from one to another. Okay, so there is one of those emblems. Just base coating it with pure white. And the same on the other one. So again, this circle in the center, I think it's crucial to get right. All right, I got it. And the circle around it, which is a bit easier because it's much larger. All right. So this is where we are with this mean guy. And we have still 30 minutes to go, which is all the time in the world. What I'm most happy about is how those tentacles transition from dark gray to almost humans-like skin tone. And the automatic blue has worked really wonders on them. Worked super well. Now for these guys I need red eyes. So you know what's coming. The same thing that I did on Mr. Mordrake. So red first. Pure red. Fine tip on the brush. And let's go. Or maybe before I do that, no, why don't I just pick out those teeth? One here and one here. This one, does it even have teeth? I think so. I think it has some teeth. Let's see if I can get them right. No. He has teeth, or it has teeth. Quite uneven, but they are definitely there. And look at the length of his mouth. It goes way back to his neck, actually. That's not a huge physical. Oops. Are we breaking up or are we good? Seems like there was a bit of an interruption, but hope things stabilize. So red eyes on this guy, and again filling the whole eye socket with red. Looking pretty mean. And the other guy, and this guy has larger eyes, so we may need a bit more of transition between red and white. So we'll go with orange on them before I hit them with yellow and white. So a bit more of gradient from pure red to a very light touch of white. And I can do it while the red continues to dry, so that it's more of a wet blending on the eye itself. And you can thin it down slightly. There we go. There's the transition I wanted to see, and I'm quite happy with it. The same on the right eye. And yellow comes next. 30 more minutes to go. That's plenty of time. A lot can be done over the span of 30 minutes. But what will happen first is the eyes. So the eyes on this guy. Yellow dot. Another yellow dot. And you know, I used to struggle painting eyes. Well, it's easier when you just paint glowy eyes and you do not paint all the detail that a human eye would have. But trust me, if you don't feel confident painting eyes, just keep at it. Keep at it, and with practice, you just get better. Sorry, there is no secret sauce. It's just a matter of practice, practice, practice. So some smooth transition from orange to yellow here would be nice, and it's kind of happening already. And pure white now. Let me just thin down the white a little bit. So there's one pupil. There's the other. Right. Now the other big guy. I mean, not the big guy, but the mean guy. Or mean looking guy. And for this one, just a line around the middle. And one more thing I want to do before I start messing with those fluorescent pigments. Well, a couple more things I want to do. But for sure, I would like to give them one more touch of dry brush, because that purple has kind of brought it together nicely. I'm actually hesitating on maybe using aromatic blue on them as well. Just a little bit of it, but enough to make it visible. But before I do that, I will do one more overbrush just to repeat those fine details on the carapace, for example, because it's such nicely designed that I think it deserves some love. Actually, there are even details on the limbs. It's super nice miniature. I think I've seen it once on the table, and that was in my only game against Ivan. But that's just the situation in my meta that people don't play Ivan for some reason. I think that those people who play explorers mainly play Maxine. I've recently faced Maxine in a really fun game, and I was playing my Castor, and the guy with whom I played, it's my regular opponent, one of my regular opponents. Again, good player, similar skill level to mine, I would say, because our games can be quite even, and also a fantastic painter. We just said, okay, there isn't much time, so let's just be offensive in that game, and we just started by throwing masters at one another at the cruise from the get-go, and things got things got interesting quite fast. Now I think I will again play with this notion of aromatic glue on these guys a bit more. So I'll get hold of aromatic glue and put them in a few spots. And the eyes, I still need to complete the eyes. So this aromatic blue will be something that will be tying the keyword, at least in my mind, because this is such a nice color and it works quite well with the idea of shadow. So I'm just dabbing it onto the miniature in some seemingly random places, but the idea is that it kind of invokes the idea that there is this dark, shadowy energy coming off of it. Okay, red glow on the eyes now. Plenty of red on those large eyes. That's really a lot of red. And a lot of red here. And a lot of red here. And again, the idea is if you watched my streams before, so that it tints the area around it while it remains whitish and yellowish to somehow present the notion that this is glowy. Okay, almost ready. No, still need athematic glue on the insectoid-like one. And we still have 20 minutes to go. So all good. So some of the athematic blue on the back, maybe some on the front. I'm applying it in excess because when it dries, it will add this nice hint that it's not just black surface that was highlighted, but there's more depth to it. And it's more interesting than just that. Okay. Almost done with these guys. I think it's now time for the dry pigments, is it? I guess it can be. It might as well be the time. So let me just get it out. Oops. Almost threw my camera off the table. I think that's the one. Not the one. I think that's the one. No, not pink. I think that previously I used magenta, and I will be keen to use the same today. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one that I used before. So magenta. Just adjust the screen a little bit, and we can move on to the final touches as we are approaching inevitably the end of the stream. But I'd like to once again show you guys how this, hopefully you can see that, how this athematic blue added extra depth to these creatures of shadow. Super nice addition, really. Now we'll still need to paint the rims of the bases with black. But now let's focus on this final element, final piece of the puzzle here, which isn't very complicated, but actually, you know what? Before I do it, I should paint the rims of the bases black, just to make sure that they are ready for, because once I apply the dry pigment, there is no going back, and the paint will shake off before I apply varnish, and I want to have more control of that. So let's go with black on the rims of the bases now. Starting with Mr. Mordrake. So it was quite a journey in this one, because it started with just regular black, just regular white, and then it gained some brown, but that brown looked too real, like too human-like for me. So I just started tweaking it with small additions of other colors, with purple, with light blue, and making it look more unusual. And brown will be perfectly fine. I mean, brown with heavy dark brown, or even maybe a hint of purple in the recessed areas, and a filter of yellow on the raised areas for Ivan. But for Mordrake, I wanted something a bit darker. Those skulls still can get some love, because they are still affected by yellow partially. Okay, that's not optimal. This guy just snapped off, and I don't like it. Let's just make a quick fix. And for quick fix, I have a quick solution. So we'll use magic super glue activator. So what will happen is I will just add a drop of paint here and here. Make sure I cover the glue, and spray the activator on the miniature. And whoops, and put it onto those legs, and that should catch on quickly, real quick, very quick, hopefully quick. Yeah, seems to be latching on. And dry pigment will go there in a second, and let's hope it survives. Just a happy little accident, nothing more. And this guy, those magnets are pretty strong. Neodymium magnets are pretty powerful. And when the miniature is fragile and not glued to the base solidly, then things can happen. I actually didn't assemble these. I got them assembled. So that's my excuse. Okay, now ready for the fun part. For the fluorescent pigments, which will be applied in a minute. On this guy as well, because he will get them on this ornament on his upper right arm. Okay, 10 more minutes to go, which is just fine. Just enough time to get things sorted. Now look at this, how intense that is. That's super strong color. And let's get an old brush, one that I can just use for this purpose. It might be this one today, I guess. Yeah, this will do. It's really hard to get rid of dry pigment once you've applied it, so I recommend using an older brush that you don't mind sacrificing for that. So there it is. Kind of glow on his side, and let me just maybe use another brush to remove excess and spread it around. So there is the badge. Well, whatever it is, it's going to continue to glow. Now the other one, the other Mr. Mordrake. I will paint. I will paint. I will share pictures of painted. I will try to take some decent pictures tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm working from home, so it's easier to have things set up. And I typically take pictures in late afternoon, ideally in late afternoon light on a sunny day where the sun doesn't shine so strong and doesn't hit my balcony directly. I'll remove some excess so that the white symbol is still visible. And I think I could do a bit more on the base as well, just like I did on these summons. I can always repaint the rim of the base. That's not an issue. I will do a bit of neon pink, neon magenta along the feet, if I can call them feet, of Mr. Mordrake. And the same will happen on these guys. All right, 10 more minutes. Perfect. That's just perfect timing. So the glow will be forming nicely because it was base coated with white, and now it's going to absorb the magenta so well. And those that land on the belly can be just spread around efficiently and fast. It's a funny sound. It's quite different than painting with standard methods, when you try to ensure that part of the powdery substance stays on the miniature. Maybe let's do the insect one first. A bit more. Almost ready. It looks super cool when it stays there after it's been. The way I approach it, I just spray matte varnish and try to spread it from distance of like 20-30 centimeters, gradually moving closer as I spray, and not spraying very strong. I mean, spraying very lightly so that it doesn't get blown off the miniature. I think I like the way it forms on the carapace, and the majority of dry pigment stays inside of it. And this little guy. Hey, thank you for the link. Yeah, we are in our final minutes. I will just do a quick recap. For now, I'm just adding the magenta using my dry pigments. And these guys, those are creatures of shadows, but you know, you could paint them very dark, very gloomy, very atmospheric, but I think that it's fun to have that kind of vibrancy to them that indicates that there is some magic happening, that those are not humanoid, well, that those are not creatures from this distance. from this world would be even not close to saying who they really are. Okay, I can also do a little bit on the base here as well. Because, you know, those are summons. So summons appear somewhere, and I think that this magenta will interact nicely with this industrial yellow base. The same on this guy. And we're going to call it a wrap in a minute. Just let me bring them all to the camera and once again show them to the world. Okay, just to make things more challenging, the background is now fully magenta. So there's one guy, looks mean, such nicely saturated black with a hint of blue to it. The other guy, and again I can remove some of the excess, but well, not necessarily. This is the insectoid-like one, probably my favorite out of the bunch. And the main guys who I was painting for the majority of the stream, Mr. Mordrakes, with their symbol indicating that they belong to this shadow realm. Here they are in their full shadow glory. Okay, so guys, thank you so much for checking in. Make sure to join tomorrow, where Haunted will be painting something nice. I'm not going to reveal what, but this is all for today. And in my next stream, I think I will paint the Devas, maybe 3 of them, maybe 6 of them, depending on how I feel about it. But for today, this will be all. Let me get one more good look at them so that they are both in the screen. Not ideal, but well, here they are. Mean and angry and ready to go hunt some scheme runners or do whatever Mr. Mordrake does. Thank you all. Keep on happy painting. And until the next one, take care, everyone. Bye bye.